Hey ladies and gentlemen, Wolfcryer here with another patch 2.6.1 build guide. Now this is for the Sunwuko's Wave of Light GR pushing build, which currently sits atop the leaderboards with a 110 GR clear. Now a couple things you need to keep in mind is this is the public test realm, which means that these are non-season type characters, so their Paragon levels are in the 4,500 to 5,000 range. So this does not mean that during Season 12 you will see a 110 clear. It just means that it is capable of doing so. And another thing that you need to keep in mind is that this is also a PTR testing for the patch 2.6.1, so not all of these changes will go live, but I do suspect that most of these changes will make it to the live server, including all of the changes involved with this build. Alright, so let's break down the gear as well as some alternative pieces that might change up as you progress in GRs. And we'll leave that to you. But this is the current gear that I am running, and like I said, there will be variations to this build, so I will do my best to go over those as well. We're going to start off with the 6-piece Sunwuko set. So you're going to wear the shoulders, the gloves, chest piece, legs, and the amulet for this set, and you are going to cube the Royal Ring of Grandeur. Now this is going to allow you to gain that 6-piece set bonus. So for this set, the 2-piece set bonus, your damage taken is reduced by 50% while Sweeping Wind is active, and you are going to keep Sweeping Wind active at all times. Now the 4-piece set bonus is not really useful for this build, but every second Sweeping Wind spawns a decoy next to the last enemy you hit that taunts nearby enemies and then explodes for 1,000 weapon damage for each stack of Sweeping Wind you have. And you will have 10 stacks of Sweeping Wind with this build. Now for the 6-piece set bonus, that has changed in patch 2.6.1. Now LTK, Tempest Rush, and Wave of Light have their damage increased by 600% for each stack of Sweeping Wind you have. That is a 6,000% damage increase when you have 10 stacks, and it no longer consumes a stack every time you hit with one of these skills, hence keeping your damage maxed out at that 6,000% damage increase, which is pretty awesome. Now for your shoulders, you are looking for dexterity, vitality, area damage, and cooldown. For your gloves, you're preferably going to want critical hit chance, critical hit damage, area damage, and dex as well. And chest piece, pretty much looking for a secondary resistance, reduced damage from elites, and dex and vite. For your pants, dex, vite, armor, and a secondary res. And for your amulet, you are looking for critical hit chance, critical hit damage, and if possible, you want percent fire damage. Now the next piece of gear you are going to want is Zokrin's Gaze. Wave of Light is now cast at your enemy. Now the stats you are looking for on this piece are dexterity, vitality, critical hit chance. It automatically comes with a damage increase to Wave of Light, and you are preferably looking for a socket. This one I did not have a socket on when I did this 90 clear. And in that socket, you are looking for either a topaz for reduced resource cost or a diamond for cooldown reduction. Now, like I said, this 90 clear was done without anything in the socket. I would prefer to have a socket, and I personally would go with the topaz just for more resource cost reduction, because this build can suck a lot of spirit away from you. Next up in your belt slot, I use Kayashiro's Soul. Sweeping Wind gains 2 stacks every second it does not deal damage to enemies. This is going to allow your Sweeping Wind to stack up pretty quick and maintain that 9 or 10 stacks that is going to allow you to do massive amounts of damage. Now another belt that is useful here would be the Witching Hour, and it is actually used in the top builds. This is going to allow you even more damage because the Witching Hour gives you attack speed and critical hit damage, which is pretty awesome. The other stats you're looking for on this belt are pretty much the normal dexterity, vitality, and armor or all resistance, that sort of thing. Defensive stats for the most part. Next up, we've got Pinto's Pride, a staple in all Wave of Light builds. Wave of Light also slows enemies by 80% for 3 seconds and deals up to 150% increased damage. Now, the thing with this is that is going to trigger your Bane of the Trapped, and since you are not a close range type of fighter with this build, you are going to need that slow to trigger your Bane of the Trapp's damage increase. So these bracers definitely come in handy, plus they increase the damage of your Wave of Light altogether. So you are going to get massive amounts of damage just by wearing these bracers. Up next is your boots. I use the crudest boots, as do most people. Mystic Ally summons 2 Mystic Allies that fight by your side. This is mainly just for spirit regeneration. As I've said, this build sucks a lot of your spirit, so you are going to want to replenish that as quickly as possible. Now, onto your 2 ring slots. Convention of Elements is very, very useful with this build. Gain up to 200% increased damage to a single element for 4 seconds, and this rotates through all available elements for your class. Now, this does mean that for monks, we get cold, fire, holy, lightning, and physical. So it does have a 5 rotation, but once you land on fire, your damage output is going to be insane. For your rings, you are looking for critical hit chance, critical hit damage, and straight up damage increase on these rings. And for your other ring, you are going to be wearing Unity. All damage taken is split between wearers of this item. You will wear a Unity, and your follower will wear a Unity as well as the legendary relic that allows your follower not to die. Now, you can craft that simply by crafting yellow relics for your follower and upgrading them in the cube until you get the one that allows them not to die, and that is going to take you maybe 4 to 6 crafts. So it is a very easy way to get it. Next up, for your first weapon, Vengeful Wind. Increase the maximum stack count of Sweeping Wind by 6 or 7. The one I've got and the one that I used in this 90 clear is only a 6, so it is on the low value, but mine is ancient and it deals more damage. So unfortunately, currently, I do not have one that increases it by 7, but that one extra stack is going to give you an additional 600% damage increase, which means that this clear could have been a lot faster. Now, on these weapons, you are looking for cooldown and area damage, although resource cost reduction is not bad either. And for your next weapon, you are looking at Kayoshiro's Blade. Increase the damage of Wave of Light by 150%. And when the initial impact of your Wave of Light hits 3 or fewer enemies, the damage is increased by up to 250%. Now, one thing to look at is the wording of this weapon. When the initial impact of your Wave of Light, that means that wherever that initial bell lands, if that hits 3 or fewer enemies, the damage is increased. So you want to be aiming this at 3 or fewer enemies. And this allows your Wave of Light Explosive Light rune to deal this damage on all those bursts that expand from the center. So it doesn't mean that everything hit by Wave of Light, simply the initial impact. So firing this directly into a large group of mobs is going to negate this effect, but firing it off slightly to the side, where you only hit 3 or fewer, even 0 mobs, this is going to increase the damage. Now let's go ahead and take a look at the cube. First up, we've got Incense Torch of the Grand Temple. Reduce the spirit cost of Wave of Light by 50% and increase its damage by 550%. So this is a massive damage increase that was added in patch 2.6.1. And for your armor slot, we've got multiple possibilities. I use Cinder Coat, reduces the resource cost of fire skills by 30%. Now another thing you could use here is Mage Fist, which will give you a 20% increased fire damage, or you could also use Nemesis Bracers, allowing you to spawn mobs at every pylon. Now that's useful, but as you increase in GRs, this could lead to several more deaths as you are spawning these elite packs onto you directly. You're going to have to dash away really quick to get out of range and then start blasting them down with your wave of light. In this run, I actually ran Nemesis Bracers, but I would prefer the Cinder Coat overall just because of the reduced resource costs, and that allows me to spam my wave of light. And over on the jewelry slot, we're looking at Royal Ring of Grandeur. Reduces the number of set items needed for set bonuses by 1. This is what allows me to wear only 5 pieces of Sunwukos and gain that 6-piece set bonus. Very useful indeed with this build, because this is what's going to allow you to cast your wave of light far away from you and tag things that are even off the screen. Now for your gems, you're looking at Bane of the Trapped, increased damage against enemies under the effects of control impairing effects, and at level 25 you gain an aura that reduces the movement speed of enemies within 15 yards by 30%, hence becoming a control impairing effect, but mainly you're going to be using your Pinto's Pride to trigger this, because that is going to give you an 80% slow on enemies, which also triggers your Bane of the Traps damage bonus. Then we have Zay's Stone of Vengeance. Damage you deal is increased by a certain percentage for every 10 yards between you and the enemy hit. And this is very useful because with this build you are a ranged caster, and the further you are away from things that can kill you, the better, because even with the Sunwuko's 2-piece set bonus and your Unity, you are still very squishy for the most part if you get into a big chunk of mobs. Plus, this also has a 20% chance on hit to stun the enemy for 1 second, also triggering that Bane of the Trapped and giving you a chance to reposition yourself if needed. And last for your gems, we have Bane of the Stricken. Each attack you make against an enemy increases the damage it takes from your attack by a certain percentage. Very useful against the Rift Guardians. And at level 25, this gem automatically gives you a 25% increased damage against the Rift Guardian. Now let's go ahead and take a look at those skills. First up, I use Mystic Ally, Air Ally. This is why you wear the Crudest Boots. A Mystic Ally fights by your side that increases your spirit regen by 4. This means because you are doubling them with your Crudest Boots, this increases your spirit regen by 8. And when you press the active for this ability, you gain 200 spirit instead of 100, allowing you to replenish your spirit when it gets low so that you can continue spamming your Wave of Light, which is your only damaging skill. Then we have the bread and butter to this build, Wave of Light Explosive Light. Release bursts of energy that deal 830% weapon damage as fire to nearby enemies. This rune is going to allow it to branch out from the epicenter of your cast and hit multiple targets all over the screen. Then we have Epiphany Desert Shroud. This is going to give you some spirit regeneration as well as giving you another 50% damage mitigator. And we have Dashing Strike Blinding Speed. You gain 40% increased chance to dodge for 4 seconds after using Dashing Strike. Now this is also going to allow you to maneuver yourself out of sticky situations as well as progress yourself through the rift, but mainly I use this to get myself out of situations where I might take lethal damage. Up next is Sweeping Wind. Now you are going to want to keep your Sweeping Wind active at all times because that is how you get your massive damage increase from your Sunwuko set. And with Inner Storm, you are going to gain 8 spirit per second, which is going to help with that massive amount of spirit that your Wave of Light is going to drain from you. And for your last skill, you are using Mantra of Salvation Agility. Now, Mantra of Salvation also increases your dodge chance by 35%, as well as increasing your resistance to elemental damage. Now for your passives, first up we have Exalted Soul. Increase maximum spirit by 50 and increase spirit regen by 4 per second. Yet another useful way for increasing your spirit regen, which is a very, very important stat with this build. Because the more often you can cast Wave of Light, the better and the more damage you will be doing. Then we have Near-Death Experience. When receiving fatal damage, you instead restore 35% life and spirit and are immune to damage and control impairing effects for 2 seconds. Now this can only happen once per minute, but this is your get out of jail free card. This is going to keep you from death when you should have died. And for your third passive, Beacon of Yeetar. Reduce all cooldowns by 20%. Cooldown reduction is very useful in keeping your Epiphany up and bringing your Mystic ally off cooldown so that you can use it to replenish your spirit. And for looking at Harmony, 40% of your single elemental resistances from items instead increase your resist to all elements. Now, if you have opted to go for all resistance instead of secondary resistance on your gear, I would definitely switch to the Guardian's Path for this passive so that you can gain that 35% increased dodge chance. All right, ladies and gentlemen, so there you have my build guide for the Sunwuko's Wave of Light GR pushing build in patch 2.6.1 season 12. Ladies and gents, thank you so very much for taking the time out of your day to watch my video. I greatly appreciate it. Make sure you hit me up over on Twitter at WolfCryerYT. Don't forget to check out the stream over at twitch.tv/Wolfcryer. Guys, thank you once again. I greatly appreciate all the support, and you guys have a great day. Peace.